Dear friends, welcome to another episode in the fantastic military world. In this video, we will talk about the latest attack by Ukrainian naval drones that destroyed another Russian ship, the Sergei Kotov. I will try to answer a frequently asked question in these days. After all, how can ships protect themselves from this? And if you are not already subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and activate the notification bell to not miss any news. If there's something that the war initiated by Russia and Ukraine is showing the world, it's that drones have indeed come to radically change the way conflicts are fought. At the beginning of that war, the drones that stood out were the aerial ones, a direct consequence of the excellent performance of drones like the Turkish Bayraktar TB2 in the Nagorno-Karabakh War, when Azerbaijani troops employed this and other drone models against Armenian forces, thereby gaining a significant and decisive tactical advantage on the ground. Therefore, in the first weeks of the Russian invasion, large drones like the Bayraktar TB2 stood out, with Ukrainians employing them in bold attacks against the massive invasion force launched by Vladimir Putin. However, over time, the Russians adapted to this threat, and although large drones are still in use in that conflict, the improvement of air defenses has led to the use of smaller and more discreet drones, resulting in the development of adaptations of domestic drones, turning them into highly lethal kamikaze drones for armored vehicles and platforms for grenade launchers that cause casualties on the battlefield every day. But drones have not been limited to the skies and have also reached the seas. When the Russian invasion began, Putin used the full power of his powerful Black Sea fleet, first to blockade and neutralize the small Ukrainian navy, and second to launch cruise missiles against cities and facilities inside Ukraine. In the first 3 months of the invasion, about 30% of all cruise missiles launched by Russia against Ukraine were through ships and submarines of the Black Sea Fleet. However, over time, it became evident to Russia that its dominance over that sea was far from guaranteed, with the first clear indication of this coming on April 14, 2022, when the Moskva, the flagship of that fleet, was sunk by Ukrainian missiles. This was followed by other attacks, damages, and sinkings of Russian ships through Ukrainian missiles. But things really started to worsen for the Russian Navy when Ukrainians began a massive use of naval drones, specifically the Magura V5, with a length of 18 feet, a weight of less than 1 ton, and a range of 497 miles, with a payload of 440 pounds. It is incredibly agile and fast, able to reach nearly 43 knots, equivalent to almost 49 miles per hour, and comes equipped with high-resolution cameras and satellite antennas, allowing precise and constant control regardless of distance and weather conditions. A highly technological equipment that for months has been collecting victims among Russian ships in the Black Sea. The first confirmed and documented attack of the Magura occurred in November 2023, when 2 Russian amphibious landing ships were destroyed at the heavily defended Chornomorsk base in Crimea. In 2024, 3 Russian ships were attacked and destroyed by Magura drones. The Ivanovs, a missile corvette of the Tarantul III class, the gigantic amphibious landing ship Cesar Konnikov, 4,000 tons and 4,400 inches in length, and more recently, on March 5th, the modern Sergei Kotov, a vessel that had been commissioned in the Russian Navy only in July 2022. If such advanced, modern, and well-armed ships are being shot down in this way by small drones, is there anything navies can do to protect themselves from such attacks? Before answering that question, it is also necessary to highlight that some of the sunken Russian ships were very agile and fast, with the Sergei Kotov standing out, which was a patrol vessel and therefore with a high level of agility and speed, easily reaching 30 knots, equivalent to 34.80 miles per hour. But even so, it was pursued and sunk by drones. The important point to highlight is that in the face of a swarm-style naval drone attack, with several attacking simultaneously and from different directions, very little can be done by the crew, especially if the attack is at night and if the action is well coordinated. In the case of the Sergei Kotov attack, images of the action show that a large part of the crew was engaged in trying to destroy the drones, with videos showing at least a dozen crew members armed with rifles and machine guns, attentive to the sea and firing numerous shots. But all this effort ended up being useless because, contrary to what many people seem to believe, seeing a small drone of just over 16 feet among the waves is not easy at all, and, in fact, from the images captured by the Sergei Kotov crew, we can notice that the drones only become, really, visible and identifiable at just 32 feet from the vessel, even with large floodlights pointed at the sea. A drone like the Magura sailing at 30 or 35 knots directly towards a warship, if seen at only 32 feet away, will give the crew at most 2 or 3 seconds to aim the weapons in that direction, fire, and hope that some shot hits the explosives. But if manual attacking is so difficult and inefficient, is there no automatic means capable of doing this, such as point defenses? Point defenses, like the United States Phalanx and Russia's AK-630, are systems that, although they can eventually be used against naval targets, are much more efficient against aerial targets, as they work in sync with airborne radars. There are some point defenses better prepared to attack naval targets, such as the Netherlands goalkeeper. But, quite contrary to an airborne radar that can identify threats in a completely open and unobstructed space around the vessel, surface radars are constantly bumping into obstacles, particularly waves. In other words, the crew can be alerted in advance about the approaching drones and even get a good sense of the attack direction. However, in the final approach phase, with a dozen or more drones maneuvering rapidly around the vessel, an automatic point defense system will inevitably let some drones pass, especially if there is a lot of swell. In terms of passive defenses, I have noticed many suggestions, such as the use of screens or grids around the vessels, similar to what is being used in some armored vehicles, mainly for the protection of the turret. Installing steel grids around the waterline of a large warship is not as easy as it seems, as this could severely affect the stability and speed of the vessels. Moreover, these grids would be destroyed in the first wave of attack, paving the way for drones to hit the hull in the next wave of attack. It is a solution whose implementation may be considered in the future, but in the immediate term, as an urgent solution, as was done with armored vehicles, is unlikely. Reinforcing armor at the waterline is also an option, but only for large ships such as destroyers and cruisers. However, for frigates, corvettes, and especially patrol ships, adding thick and heavy steel plates around the hull will radically decrease the speed and maneuverability of the vessel, and will not guarantee 100% protection. Therefore, naval drones pose a much greater challenge to ships than aerial drones do to armored vehicles. If the Russian Navy continues to losing ships at this rate, the Russian Navy will inevitably be forced to withdraw its vessels from the Black Sea, as it has already done in the western portion closest to the Ukrainian coast, an area where Russian ships dare not enter. Therefore, the most immediate solution involves installing more machine guns around the ships, as well as training and deploying crew members specifically for these positions. Another immediate measure involves installing more advanced or better adjusted surface radars for detecting small drones, and in the long term, one of the measures involves developing specific point defenses for this mission. But until then, the Russian Black Sea Fleet, which has already lost more than 25% of its ships to an adversary without a navy, will continue to suffer at the hands of Ukrainian naval drones. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe and activate the notification bell to not miss any news, criticisms, ideas, or suggestions. You can leave them in the comments.
Это что это, как аскольд, который стоит. Такой же.
Сейчас он накопитель, нахуй, я понес.
У нас не по... Ой, ты нахуй. Ебашит нахуй, ебаный. Охуеть.
Или лодка, блядь.
Дрон. Вон второй дрон. Ебать, че это? Уходить прямой волной сейчас.